Today is June the 12th, 2019. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today I'm in Bartlesville to speak with Ann Oglesby, who, let's get your title right, Vice President of Technology for Phillips 66.
That's right.
And you've been with Phillips since 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into that part of your life, let's begin with when and where you were born.
I was born in 1965 in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Not too far from here.
Not too far. That's right.
And take us through your education, your early education.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Fort Smith and went through all of my school there. In fact, we lived in the same house my whole growing up. So went to school and graduated from high school in Fort Smith. And but I did have ties back to Oklahoma, heavy ties. My parents were both born and raised in Oklahoma. My brother and sister, my dad and my brother and sister, in fact, were all born in Bartlesville. And my dad's best friend and his wife were both graduates from Oklahoma State. So when I was in high school and contemplating where I wanted to go to college, these really close family friends volunteered to take me on a campus visit to OSU. So we went. I remember going to eat at Hideaway Pizza. And anyway, I loved Stillwater. So I came home and told my parents I wanted to go to school at OSU. So that's where I went and got my chemical engineering degree there. So
what year did you finish high school?
I finished high school in 1983.
And what was the name of the high school?
Southside High School.
In Fort Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And then elementary school?
Bonneville Elementary and Chaffin Junior High in Fort Smith.
Well, did you have a favorite subject while you were coming up through there?
I liked, in the younger years, I liked everything. I was a good student and I liked creative things and science and social studies and all of that. But in high school in particular, I really liked chemistry. And I had a wonderful chemistry teacher. And so I thought I wanted to study chemistry in college. I didn't know anyone who had gone into the physical or biological sciences. My sister majored in computer engineering. One important note is my brother and sister are quite a lot older than I am. My brother's 13 years older and my sister's 10 years older. And so they've navigated life's passages before me. But my parents were in the music business and had studied music. My brother was an accountant and my sister was in computers. So I didn't know anyone who was into science or chemistry or physics or anything like that. But I liked chemistry, so that's what I thought I would major in. But my chemistry teacher suggested I consider chemical engineering. I had no idea what it was. He told me two things. He said it was more applied, so less theoretical, more about solving real problems. Actually, I guess he told me three things. It was about applied. I would make more money than if I got a degree in chemistry. And it was probably one of the most difficult academic programs. And I was very competitive. So I said, okay, sign me up. So I enrolled and went to school at OSU to study chemical engineering, having no idea what chemical engineers did. But it all worked out okay.
You stuck with it.
Yeah.
Where did you room on campus?
I lived in Willard Hall. So I was Women of Willard. It's no longer a residence hall, but went potluck and met my roommate on the first day. She and I are still very, very close friends. Wasn't air conditioned, so we learned all the techniques of how to pull in air into the building.
Such as?
So you would have your neighbor across the hall. Everyone would open their doors and you'd put a box fan on each wall and you pull the air flow through, and you just did the best you could.
And that
was hot.
And the bathroom was down the hall?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. for sure. So, but it was wonderful. It was right there, it's right there on campus, right by the Whitehurst and Library Lawn and all of that. So it's great.
Theta Pond.
Yes, Theta Pond is right out in front. So,
do you remember your room number?
Well, we lived there I lived in Willard 2.5 years and had, I think 3 different rooms. Because, as freshmen, you just get what you get. And then we would always try to move up. And so we had corner rooms. I don't remember the numbers, but yeah.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned your parents were in music.
Mm-hmm.
What in particular?
So, they owned a music store. My dad had majored in music in college. He went to Phillips University in Enid, Oklahoma, and my mom went there as well. So they, when they lived here in Bartlesville, and then that's what took them to Arkansas, was to open one of the stores in Arkansas. So they sold pianos and organs and band instruments, and so we all have taken more piano lessons than I could count ever. And we all played in the band, and so we're a pretty musical family. Mm-hmm.
Did that help when it came time to do math?
Probably, because all of us are good at math, and so I'm sure there's some connection there.
So on your first day, did they just come over and drop you at OSU, or how did that transition work?
My mom and dad brought me, and like I said, we walked in and met my roommate, Diane, and we just instantly hit it off. And I think both parents kind of stayed for a little while, but we were ready for them to go, and we moved on with college life. So really don't ever remember it not being fun and welcoming, and just the entire experience. Other than my chemistry teacher was accurate. It was the academics were incredibly difficult, so I studied very hard, but my college experience was wonderful, super fun.
Was there any particular class that about ate your lunch?
I remember yes, a couple of them. So Peacham, who Dr. Raff in the chemistry department, who didn't retire that long ago. I was like, oh my goodness, he's still there. I really loved those classes, Peacham 1 and Peacham 2, but it was the first class I remember ever taking where a lot of times what would make a class difficult would be the workload, or you would sit in the class and you would understand it, and then you go home at night and try to do the homework, and it was difficult. But that was the first class I ever sat in during the lecture and truly did not understand what he was saying, was having trouble comprehending. So that was humbling. You hang in there and eventually you get it. But that was difficult. I also, I didn't particularly like, which this is ironic now because this is the field that I'm involved in, but I didn't particularly like organic chemistry because it was a lot of memorization, it felt like. And but it was really heavy workload, and so long hours, long homework, up all night. So those are 2 that stand out. I also remember the Weeder class as a freshman, the chemistry class. I remember the very first test, I thought, well, I'm sunk. I'm going to flunk out of college because I got like a 32 out of 100. And then it turns out the class average was like a 26 or something. So I did pretty well. But anyway, I think that was, shock and awe technique or something to
make you try a little harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Were there very many females in your class?
In chemical engineering, we had, and this is still true today, I believe, we have more females than the other engineering disciplines. So my graduating class was probably 32, 35 people, something like that. And I may not have these numbers exactly right, but my guess is we probably had maybe 10 or so females. So not a trivial number by any stretch. We certainly supported each other. But a larger scale, especially in the earlier years of all of the engineering classes together, the numbers were much smaller percentage-wise.
Any female professors during that time?
Yes, in chemical engineering I did. Dr. Ruth Urbar was there, and she was wonderful and quite inspiring to us. I'm trying to think if there were any others that were professors when I was a student. I think she was the only female. I have been blessed to stay connected with the university and specifically the chemical engineering department through all these years now. And so sometimes I lose track of, now were they there when I was there or did they come later? But I think Dr. Urbar was the only female when I was a student.
That name sounds familiar. She may have been the first
She might
female
have been.
professor in that particular department. And they named a room after her recently or something.
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
they?
it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think they did.
Uh-huh.
I could be wrong on that, but I think that name's come across my
Mhm.
desk. And you graduated from there in 87.
7.
So you finished in 4 years.
I did, and we had. So after I mentioned living in Willard for 2.5 years with my roommate Diane. In the, let's see, I have to think about this. I guess it was middle of my junior year. I traded my wonderful roommate for not as great of a roommate, but he's still my roommate, is because I got married, and my husband Bill and I had ended up having a daughter when we were still in school. So our daughter Amy was born August 7th before our senior year started on like August 20th. So she was like 2 weeks old when our senior year started. My husband was majoring in finance. So we graduated in 4 years, chemical engineering and finance, and got married and had a baby. So yeah, so I've never not been a working mom. So when I started my first job out of school, we were finding daycare and off to the races. So
And it hit a bump, huh?
yeah.
So his was finance. Did he understand the chemistry part of, the chemical engineering part of what you
He
were doing?
did. I mean, well, we always kind of teased that he probably would have been a better engineer than I am. He's very, he's a little more patient at sticking with things to figure them out, especially mechanical type things. But our degrees have been very complementary. I often get asked, did I go get an MBA? Because a lot of my career has been business facing. Did I get an MBA or did I ever think about that? I actually thought about it a lot, but honestly, just sort of life got in the way, kids and family and other job responsibilities. So I never did go back and get an MBA. But I said I did the next best thing. I married someone with a finance, and then he later went on and got his accounting degree. So I had finance and accounting at home. So I would go home and ask him, what does this mean? How does this work? How do you explain this? So yeah, it was good.
Good resource there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
cool. So for those who might not know, including myself, the difference between regular chemistry and chemical engineering
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell.
Okay, well, so chemistry, I guess chemistry is the fundamental, description of the materials of nature and matter and how that all works, energy and materials and molecules and all of that. So clearly chemical engineers have to understand and have a lot of chemistry, but we pretty quickly move on to, okay, how do you take those reactions and apply them in the real world? So, for example, in the business that I'm in now, we're taking crude oil, which is many, 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 many different components, and we have to understand how to distill that into different fractions, how to react it, how to create other materials, and what types of units do you need, what temperatures, what operating conditions, what things do you need to be worried about. So it's much more about applying chemistry to do real world things.
So as you're getting ready to graduate and you're thinking job, what was your goal at that point? I mean, besides get a job, what type of job were you looking for?
Well, it's really interesting because I've now been out of college 32 years. So I do a lot, and have over the years, a lot of talking to younger people and even college students about what they want to do and their careers. And one thing I will say that I've noticed over time is students today and people that are earlier in their career are taking a lot more ownership for what they want to do than I felt like certainly I did or my generation did. We truly did want a job, and we wanted it in something we were interested in. But at that time, the chemical engineering department at OSU was pretty heavily focused on and influenced by the oil, gas, refining, and chemical industries. You could get a job outside of those industries, but it was, if you looked at who was recruiting there, it were the energy companies and the chemical companies. And so it never really crossed my mind to look anywhere else. It's like, well, I want a job. These are the companies that are interviewing. I'll interview. And then it was more about picking the location, the culture, the type of work. I knew I didn't at that time, and I'm sitting here in a research facility, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but at that time I didn't want to do research or go back for more education. I wanted to get a job in a business as opposed to a research institute, and so those were the kinds of jobs that I applied for. My first job was a very typical entry-level job as a process engineer in a chemical plant. So I went to work for Mobile Chemical Company in Beaumont, Texas. It was funny, my husband and I both interviewed, and we said, okay, whoever gets the best job, someplace we want to live, and the best salary, we'll go there, and the other person can figure it out. So that was me, and we moved to Beaumont, and he got a job at a bank, and it was a very, process engineering in a chemical plant, very typical. A lot of my fellow students ended up in similar types of jobs.
Well, in that job, were there other females?
No, I can't think of any. Not in the process engineering. There was one who was probably 4 or 5 years older than me that I remember, talking to her and working with her a little bit, but she wasn't in my same organization, so I didn't interface with her very much. Everybody else in the department and the people that I worked with were male.
Did they have any issues with a female coming in?
Not the ones that were close to my age. And I didn't detect it really from the first job that I had, which honestly I only had for about a year. But I do have a funny story about that. So after about a year, I was moved into operations. And so instead of being in an office in the administration building at the front of the facility, I moved down into one of the control rooms down into the unit. And so with the operating staff and the maintenance staff. And so I had a supervisor who was an engineer, but everybody else I interacted with all day long were craftsmen or operators that had probably worked at that plant anywhere from 15 to 35 years. And they worked shift work and all of that. So my very first day on that job, they were in a turnaround. So the unit was down. And I'll tell this story recognizing that in today's world with our safety procedures and safety approaches, we would never, ever do this now. But back then, they had this trailer that had some chemical cleaning facility or equipment to clean out heat exchangers, and it was attached to a small tractor. And so they kind of, and it was pulled up, and they kind of pointed at me and they said, we need you to take that tractor around on the other side and hook it up to do an exchanger cleaning. And I was all decked out in my gear. And so I said, okay. So I walked over there and jumped on the tractor. And I'm sure they were just laughing, because I'm sure they thought, one, does she even know what a tractor is? What they didn't know is that I grew up and my whole life have owned horses and cattle, and I've spent plenty of time on a tractor, and I could back a horse trailer since I was 12 years old. So I jumped on that tractor and I knew how to start it, which isn't just turning the key. You know, there's a couple tricks to that. So I started up the tractor. I backed that trailer like a pro, and I whipped it around. I backed it in exactly. And I looked over there and their jaws just dropped. They were shocked. They didn't know how I knew how to do that. So I had such fun that night calling my dad and telling him, Dad, guess what? And he goes, that's my girl. He was quite proud. So I think I won them over. I mean, really, literally on the first day that, okay, she may be, I think their comment was she may be a better hand than we thought.
I can only imagine if you hadn't been able to do it, though, what
Yeah.
what the other reverse would have been.
Yeah.
When you say decked out, what?
Oh, we at the time. So this is another change. We today, of course, in our facilities, we wear fireproof, fire retardant clothing, and we were just. I had to wear steel-toed boots, and it was in the summer, so I probably wasn't wearing long sleeves, but I had a hard hat and safety glasses and such. So.
Would you wear dresses to that
Oh,
type
no,
of job?
not
Probably not.
Mm-mm. No, we had to be covered and have steel-toed boots and things. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did you stay there?
I was at that plant about 2.5 years, and I did those 2 jobs. I also had a job that had a really funny title in retrospect. For a while, I was what they called a financial engineer, which now you think of, that's not a very complimentary term. It sounds like you're cooking the books or something, but whatever. They had this development role where they would put the engineers through an assignment with the finance group to learn how to basically do what we called the material balance. So just counting up what's coming into the plant, what's going out, and making sure it all tied, and helping with cost reporting and things like that. So it was very good development assignment. It's kind of my first number crunching kind of role on something, dollar number crunching. But after about 2.5 years, I had an opportunity to move to, at the time it was Mobile Chemicals headquarters were in Houston. So my husband and I, we relocated to Houston at that time. And I moved into a role which was my first taste with really the business side of things. I was in, today we would call it a supply job. So working to procure and purchase feedstocks to supply the chemical plant. And so I got to interact with third parties and talk about pricing and delivery terms, running those economics. I also had to leverage my technical background because I had to understand the specifications and if this particular component was going to cause an operating problem or whatever. So I still needed a technical background, but it was more business focused. How are we going to make the most money and negotiating and that kind of thing. And I loved that. And I did that for probably about two and a half years. And I found myself at a crossroads about 5 years out of school of, did I want to go back into a more classic engineering role, or did I want to stay on this business track? And that was a really hard decision for me because I had worked really hard for that chemical engineering degree. And I knew that if I didn't go back, that my skills would be stale and I wouldn't be competitive. I was kind of like, well, if I'm going to stay in engineering, I need to go back. But if I was honest, I really liked the business side of things. I would say I have colleagues who'd go home at night and they would read Hydrocarbon Processing magazine. Of course, then it was really a magazine. And I would be much more likely to pick up the Wall Street Journal than I would Hydrocarbon Processing. So I decided not to, and so I moved into a sales role and then kind of went on from there. I tell people that all the time, that one, I'm thankful for my technical background. I use it all the time. It comes in very handy in my current role. And you don't forget the basics. Like, I'm not going to forget the basics of my education. And it taught me how to solve problems. And then the other thing is I have that diploma, and no one can take that diploma away from me. So I did it at one point in time, but I have gone on to do just an incredibly diverse set of different kinds of things that I never imagined doing.
Well, at that crossroads, was gender an issue? I mean, were you thinking more women?
I would say not really gender as much as probably gender stereotypical things that you are drawn to, because I know plenty of females who would be very comfortable and would prefer the operating facility way of life. They want to get up every day and put their jeans and boots on and go climb distillation towers and I ironically now I really do enjoy that. But at the time, I remember thinking, kind of smells bad, and I just sort of thought there's more in the world out there that I want to see and do. I mentioned being competitive earlier. I really liked the idea that the object is to figure out how to beat your competition and make more money and innovate and solve problems. And while you can do that in that one facility, for that facility, I was really drawn to the larger enterprise type questions that I wanted to go be a part of.
So until that point, had all of your bosses or supervisors been male at that stage?
Yeah, I'm trying to think when I had my first female boss. It was quite some time, probably. I'd probably been out of school maybe 12 years, something like that.
Yeah. Women were just beginning to show up, I guess, too, in the field. So at what point did you supervise?
It was probably about that same time, actually, that I had a female boss, and I supervised 3 women. So we were girl power then, I guess. I had a sales job, and so I had a couple of customer service people, and then someone at the facility, at a plant that supported my business. And then I worked for a sales manager. So anyway.
Can you tell much difference between
male and female bosses?
Yeah.
So let me think about this. That one female boss, trying to think how many other female bosses I've ever had. I guess I've never really thought about it, but I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting one. I think I've only had one female boss. So I have learned to, I don't even have the concept of it being different, really, because I've only had one. Yeah, I can only think of one.
So as you were coming up through all these different positions, did you pick up pointers from various bosses that
I've had a lot. In fact, just for another purpose, I was looking at something the other day, and I've had 32 years, 16 different jobs. And I've had more bosses than that, because I remember one job I actually had 3 different bosses. So if you figure I probably had 22-ish maybe bosses. Um, I've had some I would consider exceptional bosses, and I've had some horrible bosses, and I've had a lot that are good and solid and fine. So
Pick and choose what works.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And you learn a lot from the bad bosses too, right?
Yeah, that's
You kind of learn
maybe more.
either what not to do, or you learn coping mechanisms because you're applying your energy to. You have to segment a certain amount of your energy to deal with whatever those issues are. So it just raises the complexity a little bit, but yeah. So yeah, there's always something to learn. In fact, kind of going on a tangent here, one of the she wasn't. Oh, actually, I did work for her so I will count her as a boss. So that's 2. I only worked for her for about 3 months, but one of the women that was very inspirational to me gave me some really good coaching one time when I was working for a boss who wasn't easy to work with, around not having a victim mentality when you're working for someone who's difficult to work with, of reframing it to what can you learn, what is possible to be accomplished in this environment, and then also sort of setting your criteria for what you're willing to tolerate, and being in control of that criteria such that you kind of take charge of it, right? So in this case, this particular boss was very erratic in their guidance, so they would tell you one thing, and then 3 or 4 days later, they would be very impatient because you were doing what they told you to do, but then they didn't recall it that way, and it felt very unfair and inefficient and all of that. And so she helped me understand how to make a plan for that, of like, okay, when are you going to confront him and call him on it? When are you going to just let it roll off? Under what situations? And so I put a plan together, a coping plan, a mechanism, so where I was in control. And that was just great counsel, because then I didn't go home and, like, if he did one of his annoying things, I would say, okay, well, here's what I said I was going to do in that case. Okay, that's one of those I'm going to let go, so let it go. Or I'm not going to let that go. Here's what I'm going to do. So it was very empowering to have that approach.
Good advice.
Mm-hmm. It was.
So each time you moved for a different position, you was by choice? I mean, you chose to go up?
I always had a choice, but there were many times where, in fact, most times where it wasn't my idea. It was presented to me as an opportunity. In fact, yeah, I would say most of those times. So when I was so I had mentioned I went to work for Mobile. So I worked for Mobile for 14 years. They would come in and say, there's an opening here. Are you interested in this? And so yes or no. And most of the times I would say, yes, why not? I'm kind of the poster child for jumping into things where I have no idea what I'm doing. So I jumped into that supply job, and from there I went into a sales job. I had never done sales. I was offered an opportunity. We then moved to Mobile's headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia, to work on an international project. So that was really exciting and fun. I learned a ton. And I had also worked on a project that involved Mexico. This one was involving Venezuela. And then Exxon and Mobil merged, and I was offered a job back in Houston in a corporate planning job. So we did that. That is when I did make a move. So I decided that I wanted to try a different company at that point in time. So just kind of started putting some feelers out, and that's when I switched and came to work for Phillips. That was in 2001. And it was funny because I had only worked in chemicals at that point in time. And Phillips had just right prior to that had formed a joint venture with its chemicals business, so Chevron Phillips Chemical. And I was interviewing with the parent with Phillips, and so there was no chemical company. So they didn't really know what to do with me because my entire background was in chemicals industry, and there was no chemicals no chemicals positions in Phillips. So that I interviewed with 4 different, very diverse groups, and ended up they hired me to do emerging businesses at the time. In 2001, we all thought we were going to run out of oil and gas, and everybody was diversifying and looking at alternative energy and all of that. And so they hired me to come in and say, to fund a lot of investments in alternatives. So I worked really closely with this research group here in Bartlesville. We started a whole lot of internal research programs, but we also funded a lot of external stuff as well. And so that job, I proactively sought and took that job. But then from there, the various jobs I've had in Phillips, a bunch of them have kind of been even out of left field. After this job, I moved to Houston. They had me run one of the specialty businesses, which was kind of akin to a chemicals business, so it was familiar to me in that regard. I did that for a few years, and then I'm gonna have to get a water. Excuse me. So
Count moves, about 4 or 5 moves by
Yeah.
this point.
yeah, exactly.
Physical moves.
So I ran our specialty businesses there for a little while. And then sometimes I have to lose track of what happened next. I think what happened next was, yes, I was asked to lead a program in climate change and sustainable development. And at that point in time, our CEO and board of directors had decided to take a proactive role in influencing legislation around climate change. And but we didn't really have anyone to say, okay, what does that mean? What are the implications for our business? What specific policies are we going to be for or against? How do we think these policies ought to be structured? And so because I had a job before, been involved in alternative energy type of thing, I guess that's how I made the list. They called and asked me if I would do that. That was a very unforeseen opportunity, but it was fascinating. So I did that. Spent a ton of time in Washington, D.C., and got to know my government affairs colleagues really, really well. And I worked on writing legislation and analyzing carbon taxes versus cap and trade programs, and learned a lot about environmental policy and environmental issues and social issues and things like that. And then I was moved into more conventional corporate planning types of things, which I had done in Exxon a little bit. And then I got a really curveball opportunity. I'll never forget this. My boss walked in one Friday and said, on Monday, I need you to meet with Jim. That was our CEO. He's going to talk to you about leading communications and public affairs. And I said, what? I mean, I was stunned. Yes. And I said, why would I want to do that? And why would anyone want me to do that? I have a technical background. I don't know anything about communications and public affairs. What are you talking about? And he says, well, you need to talk to Jim about it on Monday. And I said, do I have a choice? Well, not so sure. Anyway, so bottom line, I ended up taking that job. It was incredibly educational. I learned so much. But everyone who worked for me had either a journalism or communications or PR degree. there was not a number in sight. It's like, please just give me a chemical equation or a dollar sign. That's all I really wanted. So I was very much a fish out of water, but it was fun and I learned a ton. And but I did crave getting back into something that was more measurable. And so after about 3 years, I indicated that I really, really wanted to move back into a business. And so, we worked together and that happened. So then I moved back and I was running our lubricants business. And then I did a little stint in our compliance and risk analysis, and then I came here.
Well, each time let's see, was there a time when you said, no, I don't think I want to do that? Or did every
The only
opportunity
time
you
I
just-
really have ever said no is when I proactively chose to leave ExxonMobil, which wasn't so much the job as much as, well, first of all, I need to say I have tremendous respect for ExxonMobil. It's a phenomenal company. And I really enjoyed my time there and what I learned. But having come from the mobile side, it was a pretty dramatic cultural difference, and it was very from what I was used to. It was very prescriptive in terms of these are the processes we follow. This is how we do things, and I was used to more autonomy and being able to have more influence on how things were done. And so it was just, and it was early enough in my career. I was only out of school 14 years at that point. I decided if I was going to make a change, it was the time. So that's what I did.
What, did they ever tell you why they chose you for communications?
No, but I suspect I know. And it had to do, I think it had to do with, I had interfaced with the CEO quite heavily when I was doing the climate policy. And so he had seen me communicate with some pretty difficult stakeholders. So I think he perceived that I was a good communicator. And then also I did kind of come from the business. And at that time we were trying to strengthen the linkage of the communications group with the business. And so it was kind of like you come from the business, so you can go help this group understand how they can better connect with the business.
It's more of a management.
Mm-hmm. Right. I didn't have to know. I had an awesome team of people who knew how to do media relations and write press releases, and because I didn't know how to do any of that.
Trust them to do their job.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, when you would opt to go up, to do these various new opportunities, did you discuss it with husband before?
Oh, absolutely. We're absolutely a team. He, so we did the first however many years, the 14 years, we had the dual career thing. And, sometimes his job or his demands would take precedent, sometimes mine, just like couples always do, right? You have to, we always laugh. It's when you wake up in the morning and the kid has an ear infection, it's like, you are, well, my day's more important. Well, my day's more important. Who's gonna stay home and go to the pediatrician? So, yeah, so we had to navigate all of that. But when I took the job with Phillips in Bartlesville, my husband's name is Bill. He stopped working, which was awesome for me. Our daughter was in the 10th grade. Our son was in the 1st grade, and so having the luxury, I was traveling a lot. I had employees in Bartlesville, Houston, Europe. I think we had one in Singapore even. So I was traveling a lot. So having the luxury of my husband being home was wonderful. But yeah, he has always been a part of all of those decisions. And actually, one of the things that was kind of neat about that is he knows better than I do when I'm having fun at a job and when I'm not. I remember when I decided to leave ExxonMobil, he was very supportive of that because he could tell I wasn't happy. And I've had other jobs where it's clear. He goes, you need to think about what, are you ready for a change or whatever? And then I'll make that change and get into something different. He goes, I can tell you're loving it, So I don't realize how I'm taking those things home, but I clearly am, because he often comments on that.
It sounds like you like challenges.
I do, yeah. I like a lot of variety and being able to tell that we're improving, making something better.
So has your daughter gone into a science or technology?
No, she didn't. She actually followed in her dad's footsteps. So she went to OSU, her degree's in international business, and then she actually went back and got her second degree in Spanish. My son, on the other hand, is an engineer, so he's a mechanical engineer. So yeah, we have 2 engineers in the family, 2 businesses people in the family.
So a little bit of math, I guess, in the business.
Oh yeah, she's definitely a math whiz. And ironically, even though she majored in business, she probably would have been a great engineer too. Our kids are 9 years different, 8.5, 9 years difference, and so in math we get these toys, assembly required or whatever. Here, Amy, put this together. She was great at that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So when you were traveling all over, what would a typical day be like?
Oh,
well, checking on the particular people or just the process?
Yeah. Well, over you go through your career. I say now I don't actually do all that much anymore. So I don't do very many calculations. I don't write things. I'm not writing reports. I'm not preparing presentations. I am at that level now where I am. I read a lot. I listen a lot. I ask questions. I give guidance. I make decisions. I do a lot of email. So I sit in a lot of meetings. I do a lot of email. I travel. I meet people. I talk to people. I understand things, help us think through problems. But, it always hasn't always been that way, of course, right? So in order to, because I've done so many different kinds of things, I often say I know this much about a lot, right? Because I've worked in businesses, I've dealt a lot with customers, so I've done sales, I've done front end innovation and research, I've done structuring deals, I've negotiated, I've communicated, I've managed risks, I've cut costs, I've done a lot of those kinds of things, dealt with lawyers, dealt with human resources issues of all sorts. But in order to do those things, at some point, a lot of it, in my history, I actually had to do, right? So the kind of coming back to having chemical engineering background, I haven't actually solved a chemical engineering problem myself in at least 20 years, right? So heaven help us if I'm the one that has to be doing that. But having done it enough early on, I have an idea of what it takes and what the challenges are and those kinds of things.
Kind of like 30 years of on-the-job training, in a sense.
Yeah, and I will say I do have. I really enjoy the fact that I've had this much diversity of experience, but it does. There are times when I wish I had more depth in something. It's like I'm not an expert in anything. And a lot of people who've worked for 32 years can say, I know I can hold my own on this topic with anyone, right? There are very few topics that I can go very deep on because I haven't stayed in any one area for very long. Kind of more of a utility player, maybe.
The big picture.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would say I'm really, really good at is jumping into things that I don't know anything about. I'm very comfortable with feeling like I don't know anything. I'm very comfortable with asking questions. Very comfortable with potentially being embarrassed because I asked a really stupid question. Very comfortable with learning. I've grown confident in my capacity to learn because I've had to learn over and over and over and over again. So, so I guess that's
maybe that's your secret.
Yeah.
Your attribute that's got you this far.
Yeah.
So you don't believe in fake it till you make it?
No, just be honest that you. I mean, sometimes you have to fake it, but I mean, honestly, I just find being really honest about what you know and what you don't know. So, you know, when I came into this job, I'm running a world-class research and development organization. And I told the team, I am not here to help you do better research or to give you advice on how to structure your labs or approach your, you know, research program. I have no expertise in that. But I can definitely say that is a nifty idea. How are we going to make money? Let's think through that together. And I can also say, what is our strategy for that? Like, how would we create value with that idea? You know, so those are those kinds of things. But I can't walk into a laboratory and tell them, oh, you got to do this experiment before that one. I don't have that level of expertise.
So how many people do you supervise roughly?
So on this site, we have about 350 Phillips employees, but we also have, like our joint venture, Chevron Phillips has employees here, and we have some other tenants and contractors. So on the total site, we have, it's somewhere between 600 and 700 people that work here at this research facility. So, and then I also wear a separate hat. So I run the R&D organization, but I also serve as our sort of senior Phillips 66 executive for Oklahoma and Bartlesville specifically. So any of the external engagement, representing, you know, deciding issues relative to our facilities and employees and things here in Oklahoma, then I'm involved in all of that. So,
are you usually the only female at the table?
No, not really. I am. So, for example, on my leadership team at R&D here, so trying to think, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 of us that are female, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 males, 4 females. And then we have what we call a Bartlesville leadership team, which is, there are about a dozen or so groups of Phillips 66 employees here. So we have everything from our IT computer systems groups, our finance, back office, our HR, our safety, midstream operations. Anyway, there's about a dozen. So on that leadership team, we have, it's probably about the same ratio. Maybe 4 of 10 are female.
Is that by design or just?
Well, yes and no. We definitely, when we have an opportunity, we hire the best candidate, independent of who they are or their gender or background or whatever. But we try really, really hard to make the pool of qualified candidates as diverse as possible. So, that is an area that I have a lot of passion about and have worked. You know, it's not fair to call it in any way, shape, or form extracurricular type of activities because it's so integrated in business importance. But the idea of workplace culture, diversity, including everybody are real sort of personal passions of mine, and they make great business sense. But I've been involved in that space for many, many, many years. and continue to be involved there.
Well, are there things that the company does to retain women once they're hired? I mean,
Yeah, we have, so for example, we have things called ERGs, Employee Resource Groups. So we have a women's network. In fact, tomorrow night I'm speaking at a women's network event here in Bartlesville. But we have other ERGs. So we have the Black Employee Network, the Hispanic Network, Pride 66 for gay and lesbian employees. We have Native American Network. I'm forgetting. Veterans Network. So anyway, we have these employee resource groups, which are awesome because it allows employees to engage and network with people that have similar backgrounds or interests. But you don't have to be from that demographic to be a part of that ERG. In fact, one of the things we encourage is, anybody. Okay, this year maybe I want to join and participate with the Asian American Network. I'm not Asian American, but how cool. I get to learn, I get to go and interact and experience some of that community's activities and things. And those ERGs do a lot of professional development type things, and they do a lot in the community. They reach out oftentimes to their demographic area. So we have that. We also have, over the years, have gotten a lot more flexible with, for example, we have nursing mothers' rooms, and we have paternity leave and maternity leave, and we have so many more family-friendly policies than we used to. But as much as anything, I think it is. It's a set of behaviors. It's a set of being good listeners and recognizing that unless you've specifically walked in someone's shoes, you probably don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes. And so how do you learn what those concerns are? Make it safe for people to say, maybe I'm in a wheelchair, or maybe I, don't have a college degree, or maybe I, am a lesbian, or maybe I am a different religion than a religion that is not common in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Whatever that is, we have to make it okay for people to talk about that in a way that they can express if they have concerns, and we have to work together on what those concerns are. So it's a lot more just around, we say you can have diversity, you can design in diversity. I can hire a very diverse group, but that doesn't do any good if you're not inclusive and welcoming of that diversity. So in Phillips 66, we call it I&D, not D&I. Most people call it diversity and inclusion. We call it inclusion and diversity. And part of that is because we say we lead with inclusion. If you don't lead with inclusion, then the diversity doesn't matter.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how early do you get here in the morning?
I have a pretty varied schedule, actually. Part of that is having just moved back up here a year and a half ago from Houston. I am still on cloud 9 about my 10-minute commute that I love. So because it only takes me 10 minutes to get here, depending on what I'm doing, I get here as early as 6:15 or 6:30 in the morning, and sometimes I don't get here till 8. So it just sort of depends on what my day is and what's going on, and if I've got things I need to take care of, before I get here, so that because I've got a dinner event and I'm not going to get home till really late. And I'm almost always here between 7:30 and 8, and I'm almost always here till, 5:30-ish, but it's kind of
still more than a 40-hour week.
Typical it is. Week. I mean, that question is funny. Like I said, I talked to a lot of earlier career, and one of my favorite stories is this wasn't very long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was talking to this young woman, and she had been working for about 2 years. And she'd been married about a year, and she and her husband were talking about, in another 2 years, whatever, they wanted to start to have children. And so she was asking me all sorts of advice, and she said, I just can't imagine everything you do, how you manage everything, and how you juggle all these balls, and you're thinking about 1,000 things a day, and you know so much, and you manage your home life and your work life and your stress level, and you just do all these things. And I just looked at her and I said, well, I would hope so. I've been doing this for 30 years. You've been doing it for 2. I hope I'm better at it than you are, because anything in life, if you've done something for 30 years, you would hope that you get proficient at it. And so that, you don't, when you at this level and at this stage, most nights I do go home and do email at night. And I mean, I do spend time on things on the weekends, and it's just, I choose to do that because of the roles that I have. But I wouldn't expect someone that's a year out of college to do that. You're not at that level of demand, and you've got other things in your life that you're appropriately focused on. So anyway, it's choices.
Any advice you would give them? Particular advice?
The one thing I always say is it's a marathon, not a sprint. There have been times in my life when work has gotten way more than its fair share. And there are times in my life where my personal life needed and did get way more than, work was not getting its fair share. And you got to not feel too guilty about that. I mean, because it goes up and down. I mean, there's times when you come and you get here at 8 and you go home at 5 and that's it. And you don't, you're probably not working at your highest level of productivity. And there's other times when everything's clicking and you are just cruising and you are really delivering tremendous value to the company. And, those things don't have to be, it's not all associated with the time you put in for sure. But there's ups and downs. Like you and I were visiting earlier about parents, we all you go through those stages where people get sick or you get sick or there's stresses at home or whatever. But there's other times when projects are intense. And so it's almost never in perfect balance. You're almost never eating right, exercising, getting enough sleep, your project's going great, your marriage is going great, your kids are doing great, your yard is mown, your house is clean. Like that almost never exists. So don't expect that. It's
Don't set the bar too.
Yeah, it's up and down all the time. Just go with it.
Do you think being a female helps with that perspective? Have that perspective?
I do think that I and my generation, it's hard for me to know if this is still the case, but certainly, my mother is 89 years old. She quit college to support my dad while he finished, but she never went back. She she worked always. My mom worked, but she also cooked and cleaned and did a lot of the stereotypical, conventional kinds of things. My husband and I have been much more teammates around that. I mean, even today, I get home and it's like, well, what do you want to do for dinner? And sometimes he'll say, well, I'll cook, or I'll say, well, we're very much more sort of sharing of those sort of domestic duties. That said, there are things that I care about that are very gender stereotypical, that I put those pressures. I care about whatever it is. I care about buying and fixing up the birthday gift for my grandsons in a really cute little creative way, as opposed to just ordering a toy and mailing it to them, right? Or having my house look a certain way. And so I put those pressures on myself. If I'm going to have company, I put a lot of pressure on myself around what my house looks like or what. And I've learned. I remember a particular story when my husband first stopped working. Our son was 6, and I came home one day, and my husband had bought my son a pair of new tennis shoes. And I had commented a couple of days earlier that Matthew needed new tennis shoes. And prior to that point, for whatever reason, right or wrong, I had always bought the shoes. And so when I came home and my husband had bought my son a pair of tennis shoes, I just lost it. Just tears. I'm a horrible mom. How dare you buy his tennis shoes? You know, blah, blah, blah. And my poor husband's like, I'm just trying to help. And because we hadn't really talked through that, and I had to let it go. I mean, the reason we bought the tennis shoes is Matthew was crying every morning because his feet hurt in his old tennis shoes, and I was on a business trip. And he made a logical decision, which is, I'm going to go buy the kids some new tennis shoes. But I was very hurt by that because he was taking away my role as a mom. So I do think that I know that I did. I can't speak for other people, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to be more perfect in a lot of the stereotypical roles. And over time, that's another piece of advice I give. People that work in our industry, and most certainly people with engineering backgrounds, you are probably being paid pretty well. So your choice is time or money. You can spend time on something or you can spend money on something. And if you don't have enough time, then spend money. I mean, you make enough money. So get a good daycare that you're comfortable with. Have someone clean your house. If you want to do the whole meals, order meals or do it, because it's not worth the stress. And that whole you can do it all, well, you can, sort of, except are you going to get enough sleep? Are you going to have just you time where you just sit back and do nothing? And those are important too. So spend that money that you're making from working on things to make your life simpler. So I definitely am a big fan of that.
Higher lawns from this.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you mentioned salary, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this either. Has there been discrepancy between female and males in the positions you were in? I don't know that specific to myself. I know that as a company, we look at that and we look at making sure that everyone is fairly paid within ranges and all of that. And sometimes we find mistakes or, things where, that's not quite lined up the way it should be. And occasionally we'll make, corrections for that. So I feel good about working for a company that watches for those kinds of things. So yeah, I don't worry about that. I guess that might have changed in the 30 years too, since you've been in the business. Back in the 80s, it might have been.
Yeah, I do feel like, one of the things I've learned in my journey around diversity is to be very humble, though, about we're all human and we all have biases and we all make judgments based on stereotypes and beliefs. And some of those are quite useful, right? But otherwise, if we had to evaluate every single decision, every single moment, we would be incredibly inefficient. But because we take shortcuts to make decisions, we allow our biases to guide those shortcuts. And so I may see a resume of someone that has an indicator on it that causes me to make a conclusion about that person that may or may not be accurate, right? And so I've learned to really, there's ways to combat that. Have multiple people looking at resumes. You can even take off a lot of the indicators. Make sure that you look at broad candidate pools. And so there's ways to check those biases, but we all have them. And we shouldn't feel guilty about that. We all have them. We're human. We're going to have them. And so working together to try to overcome those is important.
Well, the other question that comes similar to that would be, being a female, has that in the back of your mind, you thought, well, I better do a good job because the next female coming up the line, job may depend on it, opportunities may depend on it.
One of the things that I do think is we can as females, we can help each other. We can build each other's confidence. We can submit and make opportunities happen. We can challenge. Well, what about her? Let's bring her into the candidate pool. And maybe because of the biases represented, she wasn't in the candidate pool. We can take chances on people. We can be, I mentioned those employee resource groups. We can reach out. I had an experience recently with a group of fairly senior women, and we were together. There were 8 or 10 of us together, and it was just the women, and we were just having a great time, just laughing and talking, and it was really fun. But it was during a business type activity, so we were dressed in business clothes and at work and stuff. And it struck me that I really like these women and I really enjoy them, but I said, I don't have time to do this outside of work. I mean, I work, I go home, I see my husband, we have activities, everybody, life gets in the way, right? And you kind of get on your treadmill of just daily life and chores and taking care of family and all that sort of stuff. But how good it felt to be in that sort of collegial group of people that I had a lot in common with. And it just struck me of, we've got to find more ways to make that happen, because otherwise we're just all going 1,000. And it is important to have that network of support, no matter what level you're at. I think we do a good job of making those networks for early career people, because we recognize how important that is, so that they don't get freaked out and jump ship too early. They hang in there through those crucial periods where they're having their first kids, or they're having to relocate, or whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that you get to some level where you don't need that network of people, or kind of you have a similar background with.
Well, I've had other people say that some companies have felt like a family back in the 80s and 90s, and then that has changed recently. Like in the last 5 or 6 years, it's shifted. So maybe that comes into play too. And there's other, too much, not enough time, basically, at the end of the day. So what do you do to relax?
So I'm a horse person.
Okay.
So always have been. I grew up riding horses, and Bill and I have had horses, let's see, I guess now for 25 plus years. And we've always had a horse. And every once in a while, through whatever jobs and craziness, I'll say, why do we keep these horses or whatever? And Bill will say, I've known you with horses and I've known you without, and I like you better with. So that's my outlet. It's just, in fact, earlier this week, I had no business. I have a lot going on right now, and I'm actually kind of feeling quite behind on my to-do list. And I had no business whatsoever taking an entire evening to go literally horse around. But we had been invited by a friend to go do some riding. And so we did. And I left here and went home and threw on some jeans and stuck the horses in a trailer. And when we were driving home that night, it was 9:30 at night, and I told Bill, I said, this was the best thing we could have done. I got nothing productive done, but I feel completely de-stressed, refreshed. It was super fun. So that's my thing. Other than, of course, I love being with my family and everything, but my outlet is my horses.
Try to do it once a week.
At least, yeah. Here it's better because in Houston, our horses were about 45 minutes away from where we lived, so it was much more difficult. But in Bartlesville, we live on our own property, so they're right outside my kitchen window.
How many do you have?
4. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So what are you currently reading anything or listening to a particular audiobook?
Well, that's a thing that's gone downhill with a 10-minute commute. You can't do audiobooks very well.
That's true.
But I honestly, someone just loaned me 2 days ago, and I haven't started it yet, Michelle Obama's new book. So I haven't read it yet, but it's on my nightstand. But to be honest, I don't read that much for pleasure because I do read a lot for work. And I'm a real outdoors person. I spend a lot of time outdoors with we also have other animals, cattle and dogs and cats and all that sort of stuff. So I am usually outside until dark or dark 30 and come in and just tired, got to go to bed and get up the next morning and do it again. So I don't read it unless I'm traveling. If I'm traveling quite a bit, then I'll read because I read on airplanes and stuff.
So what do you think's next for you?
Well, we're thrilled to be back here. As you can't tell, I just we have such a history in this part of the country, and it feels like home. So I'm not volunteering to leave anytime soon. I hope we can stay here for quite some time, and having a great time with this job is super fun, and the community is fun. And so for the near term, I think we're settled. We frequently get asked, where are we going to retire? And I said, if I had $1 for every time we've debated that question, we could have retired a long time ago. But our kids are all, in different locations. And so Bill and I laughed. We said we want the lake in the front yard and the ranch in the backyard, although we'd be okay with the ranch in the front yard and the lake in the background. I just don't know where that ranch and that lake are. So eventually we'll land on the lake and
probably not Houston.
No, probably not. We've lived in Houston 3 times, tons of friends. I miss the Tex-Mex, and there's a great grocery store chain there, H-E-B Grocery. I miss those 2 things and the people. But other than that, we probably won't end up there. So.
Well, is your dad still proud of you? I'm assuming.
Well, my dad actually passed away, but I believe he's looking down and is proud, of course. And he was my horse buddy, so he would be excited that I'm still very much into that. And then, my parents. Well, my dad actually passed away before we moved to Bartlesville the first time, but my mom is thrilled because she still will come here and remember being an early married couple and living here, and drive by the house they lived in and stuff. So it's kind of neat.
Good memories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, have you had a role model or mentor through the years?
Yes, but I would say I have a couple of people work-wise, very much so. Probably the most sustaining thread through that has been my brother and sister. Because they're older than I am. So when I was interviewing for jobs in college, I was 21 years old. My sister was 31. My brother was 34. They both worked for major corporations. My sister took me and bought my interview suit. They told me, so they've always been there. They're the ones I call, I had this problem. What do I do about this? Just always there. Now they are teaching me how to be retired, which is kind of depressing. I have to remind them, I still have a job. Don't call me at Tuesday afternoon to tell me there's a sale at whatever store, So, but anyway, so they I've been very blessed by that, to have them as role models. Like I said, they were both had corporate careers, both very, very successful at balancing family, and they've just been really instrumental in helping me navigate things like that. So,
Well, I don't know the answer to this either. Are
mhm.
people in your position, are there conferences,
Mhm.
things that you gather together as a group of the same level that you could discuss
Oh
various
yeah,
things with?
yeah, for sure. And that's helpful too. I mean, you just kind of network with people also that you meet. Um, so yeah, it's those conversations. Well, frankly, in my role, especially right now, um, it's very well. It no matter what, it's pretty heavily dominated by men. Um, and I would also say, and I am one of those too. I am no different. It often is dominated by people who have this job. They're either single or their spouse does not work, and my spouse doesn't work. So, not to say he's not incredibly busy and do tons of stuff, but he doesn't go to work every day to draw a salary. And so that so we're often talking about strategies, and how did you structure your innovation program, or how do you handle whatever it is. We're usually not talking about how are you dealing with the fact that in fact, I think that's what we have to get better at. We have to get better about real world life experiences of navigating careers. Because I have a friend who, my children are grown and out of college, and she's my age, but she still has very young children. And so she had her children a lot later in life than I did. And she talks about how she felt like she was always so supportive of young families and young mothers and fathers. But until she actually had children herself, the part that she was missing was not the logistics, like, okay, how do you get them to daycare and soccer and all that stuff. The part she was missing was the fatigue and the guilt. And she says, I thought, okay, well, you just got to manage the logistics. I didn't realize you're also managing the fact that you're tired all the time. And there's always this emotional weight you're carrying all the time. Either because you dropped your kid off at daycare and they were screaming and crying, or you're walking in late to work and you're embarrassed and you're wondering what your boss thinks because you were late. Or, whatever that is, there's just this baggage that you carry. She says, I didn't get that until I walked in those shoes. And I think those are the kinds of things that we've got to have a culture that allows you to say, I'm having a bad day today because this happened. I mean, it's real. It happens to everybody. And I think the more we do that, the more family and just not family. I mean, you can be single and have all these kinds of issues yourself, so how we get more accommodating of people to be their best at workplace, because you don't just check all those issues when you walk in the front door, right?
And reverse, take them home with you a lot of times.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Trying to wrap up. Is there anything we haven't covered that we need to?
I don't know. I feel like I've been all over the place.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Advice for young girls or boys, for that matter.
Actually, one thing I would say one of the issues I am concerned about is girls self-selecting out of science early. And I don't think that's simple. We've got to figure out why that is. Because when you look at elementary school and even early junior high and stuff, you'll have the same numbers of girls and boys signing up for, they have these programs that are whatever, I forget what they're called. Back when my kids were doing it, there was a discovery Discovery something, where they were like science projects, and you signed up for teams and competitions, or science fair. We host a science fair here at the research center every year, and there's in the younger year, in the earlier grades, you have equal numbers of girls and boys. In fact, in some cases, you have more girls than boys. But when you get to the senior high, you have a lot fewer girls. So what is it that's happening? Why are they self-selecting out? I don't think it's because they just decide they don't like it anymore. Something's happening there. And we got to figure that out, because we need everybody. And when we look at our workforce needs in the future, we don't have enough scientists and engineers and mathematicians to do the things we're going to need done. And so we can't have people self-selecting out for reasons that we don't understand. So if you're a young girl that's watching this, it's not, you're absolutely capable. It's wonderful and exciting and fun. You're not going to be working with a bunch of old guys, and even if you are, because I mostly am, it's really fun. I like those guys, and it doesn't, I think we have to work that problem harder.
One thing in your own situation, it was your high school teacher, chemistry teacher, that planted that seed in your mind. So
yeah,
we need a few teachers to.
Yes. Well, actually, one of the things we're doing, which I just met with them a few days ago, I'm so excited about this. We have this summer, and this is the second or third year we've done it, third year, I guess. We have 6 high school science and math teachers that are doing a summer internship with us here at the research center. And they come and they do real jobs in our labs and technicians and all of that stuff, and work on projects. And then we do some other development things for them to get them exposed to different types of things. And then at the end of the summer, we want them to tell us what they've learned that they can then take back into the classroom. And it's been really successful. In fact, we have one of the teachers this year that this is her second time to do it, because then they're able to go back into the classroom and help their students understand what these jobs are, because they've been here. So we're really excited about that program.
Do they apply for it? Or
yes. Yes.
Does it have to be a science or math?
Yes. Yeah. Because it's all about encouraging kids to pursue STEM fields.
I'm thinking school librarian or school counselor.
Oh, yeah? Well, yeah, that's true. Maybe we'll have, that's a good idea. Maybe we'll think about that. But it's funny. We have them, like one of them was her before she got her teaching certificate in education, I think she had a chemistry or something like that background, and so but it's been a while since she had that. So she was talking about, picking up a little bit of it here and there in some of the work she's doing this summer.
Okay. Looking back, has there been any major hurdle or roadblock that you recall? Doesn't sound like it.
I think mainly it's just, probably having courage to do things. The more you do it, the more confidence you get. But, when I decided to leave ExxonMobil, that was a big thing. I mean, ExxonMobil is the largest U.S. energy company, right? And to decide I'm going to pivot to something different, which was absolutely the right thing for me to do, but that was scary. So having, there's been a lot of times when I've cried on the way to work and cried on the way home and been stressed and worried, and am I good enough? And am I going to be able to do that? And, I've had a lot of those days. Everybody has those days. Nobody ever talks about them, but everybody has those days. So but the more you realize, okay, I figured it out. I did it. Nothing bad happened. You get more confidence in overcoming those challenges.
You backed up that tractor perfectly.
I did, yeah. That I have to thank my dad for that.
Those few hidden skills.
Yeah,
You
and
never
actually,
know.
you know what? I was telling my mom this the other day. I had a brother, a sister, and then there was 10 years, and then there was me. So I was 5 when my brother left for college. And so there was a lot of time when we had the horses and the cows and all, when I was it. And so every day my dad and I were out there. My gender was never, it didn't matter that I was a girl. I still had to pick up the hay bale. I still had to drive the tractor. I still had to help build the fence. And so I grew up, I never thought about it at the time. It just was what it was. But I grew up in an environment where my gender didn't matter. I was expected to be able to do the things.
Well, that's a credit to your parents, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm thankful for that. But I guess it never occurred to me to not think I could do it. There's really nothing. I've never been told I couldn't do something. Certainly not because of my gender. It never occurred to me that I couldn't do anything. Now, there's lots of things I don't want to do, not interested in doing, but never because someone told me I couldn't do it. So
I'm glad you agreed to do this.
yeah.
You could do it. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Thank you.
Anything else you want to add before I ask my last?
I don't think so.
I usually end up with asking people how do they want to be remembered, like when history writes about you, how do you want them to remember?
Gosh, that'll make me emotional. Absolutely, without a doubt, as it would be centered on my family, right? So, good mom who loved her kids and her grandkids and her husband and her parents and her brothers and sisters and all that. So, my family is unquestionably my most treasured thing in the world. I'm so blessed. And so I would want to be remembered as loving and fun and courageous, probably.
What I've learned today, I think you meet all of those. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.